Hi, this is Steve, and here are some more of my gaming vexes. Hello, and welcome to Rex's Gaming Vexes. This podcast chronicles my ongoing efforts to try to run and or play all of the tabletop role-playing games that would otherwise sit on my shelves, looking pretty but gathering dust. Essentially, it's an attempt to rationalise all the foolish purchases I've made over the past 6 years, but it's fun to sit down with friends after we've finished a series and mull over our experiences with a system or setting. It's particularly fitting that this episode was released on 31st of October 2023, All Hallows Eve, as in it, we look back on our experiences of playing Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition over not one, but two separate series. The episode comes in two parts. In the first, we talk about our playthrough of the Fall of London campaign, which chronicles, there's that word again, the downfall of vampire society in 2012 at the hands of the Second Inquisition. Our group for this one included a mix of players, some very deep in the lore of Vampire the Masquerade, and others less so. I include myself in the latter group. The second part looks back over a shorter series I ran for Martin, Sam, Dirk the Dice and Blythe to give them a sense of how the 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade runs. It's fair to say that the experience was not at all what they expected and underlines why the use of safety tools and a sensitive approach to the subject matter is so important in horror gaming. For those who are going to play the Fall of London, there are lots of spoilers in this episode, so you may want to stake this one and put it into torpor for the time being. For everyone else, grab a cushion to hide behind, turn on all the lights, and get ready. Today we're going to talk about our game of Vampire 5th edition that we played recently. But first of all, we're just going to go around and I'd like to introduce yourself and a little bit about the character you've played. So,
yeah, I'm Sam. Sam Zero Veil on all the socials. Yeah, despite gaming for 40 plus years, never actually played any World of Darkness game ever. Never really got interested in that. It was more seemed a big gothy, emotional type of role play. Nothing like the type of heroic gameplay I'd normally prefer. The older you get, the more you want to experience stuff, though. You know, you've got to try everything before you go. So, thanks to offering for to run it for us, I think I took the chance. I'm going to go for it. So I did. My character was called Tommy. He was a Nosferatu ex-soldier. And we'll come a bit later on onto the sort of change made during his.
Yeah, he evolved, didn't he?
He evolved a little bit. Yeah,
quite right too. Okay, thanks, Sam.
Hi, I'm Kat. I'm at Mere Beer. I was playing Dr. Henry Banerjee, who's a Carter doctor who dabbled in the occult, which is how we came to the attention of Kindred Society. I have played Vampire quite a lot. I played from Revised onwards, so this wasn't my first shot at the rodeo, but it was great fun to play, particularly with somebody who hadn't played before, because I did like the way that it was structured, and it worked really well to bring in new players and also myself too, because I don't normally play pre-gen, so it was quite fun to play someone who turned out to be quite psychotic in a very low, creepy manner.
Yeah, hi, I'm Olga Maximenko. I've played a character called Lady Catherine, who was a Ventru, it was pre-gen character. I think I was the one who joined the party last, so I think that was the character I was given, and it's a Ventru, and it's absolutely the type that I would never pick myself. So it was it was a challenge. It was interesting and it was a challenge. I really enjoyed and really glad that I joined to do it. But I've played V20 before as a LARP for last 3 years, and then I've played some other tabletops which were also vampire, but they've never lasted this long, like a pre-written long journey kind of thing. I'm more of a LARPer in preference than tabletop, but D&D and other stuff. But this one, the V5, was kind of the first proper, really long and finished kind of module that I've played with this character.
So I hope we haven't put you off too much anyway, at least. Okay.
Oh, I loved playing it.
Hey, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, who you played in the game, if you can remember, and also your experience with World of Darkness games in general? Because I know you've got a long and storied history with this, haven't you?
Yeah, it is a love hate relationship. Yeah. So I'm Kay on Twitter at K_0. I've been playing in this game. I played Tony Castelli, the Bruja pragmatic fixer, who also happens to be a trans man. And it was well out of my comfort zone in lots of different ways, but I was really up for the challenge of playing somebody quite different, because I have played a fair amount of World of Darkness, particularly Vampire. Vampire still remains the one and only game that I've ever GM. And of course, you were part of my Vampire story that I decided to tell in the 50.
The one and only game. You've never GM'd a game other than that, or
no, that was the only one I'd ever done.
I'm surprised in that case, because you didn't come across as a novice GM or anything like that. So
well, that's high praise from you, definitely. But the thing was, it's the only game that I ever felt confident enough to GM, because I knew the rules well enough. And when I decided to run the game, fifth edition had only just come out, and everybody was just as new to the rule changes as I was. So I felt I could do a lot of different things with the rules, and I guess we'll get onto that in a little bit. But yeah, World of Darkness games, I never tried Werewolf, which was a real shame, and I always wanted to, but I just never found a group who wanted to play it. And I did almost get into a game of Mage Ascension.
Okay.
But noped out because the rules were terrifying. The further I got into the rules, the more awful it was. And it was one of those things, like, I think World of Darkness is like boiling frogs, in that if you increase the temperature slowly, you can boil a frog to death and it won't even notice. Right. But if you throw a frog into a hot pot, it will jump straight out. The frog will notice and it will jump. And that was Mage for me. Mage was I got boiled very quickly with that. Yeah. Whereas with Vampire, I've been with it, since pre-Gehenna era. So yeah, you can put me into something that's very crunchy rules wise, at least for World of Darkness, and I won't notice so much.
Have you played lots of Vampire in the past, though?
Not lots, but a fair amount. I think it's of all the games that I've played, it's one of the ones that I've played more often. I always played mostly as a Malkavian, and recently I got into sort of Nosferatu stuff. So I'd never played a Bruja, and it was really interesting to me to play Tony.
Something different. Yeah. So I mean, World of Darkness. I mean, I can remember going into Oxford Street Virgin Megastore games store probably about 1990, 1991, thereabouts. And I remember seeing, at the time I was buying a load of Dark Conspiracy and Battletech and that sort of stuff. But I remember seeing these huge, this whole wall full of green books with this rose on the front, Vampire the Masquerade. And I thought, that's interesting. And I remember buying it. I bought the book and I bought a few other bits and pieces, but it's the sort of thing that as with all these things, you buy them, and I think I maybe played once or twice, but it just wasn't the right speed for the group. I remember, if it gives you an example of the type of players or the experience we had, was one of the players, he called himself the Ice Cream Man, and basically he was a weird vampire who had, how he got an ice cream man that worked at an ice cream van that worked at night, I don't know, but anyway, he was using an ice cream van to deal drugs to kids. So we sort of drew a veil over that very, very quickly and moved on to many other games. But since then, so the early 90s, couple of sessions, never played it since. Sam, how did you manage to avoid it? Because it was everywhere in the 90s. I mean, you've role played all this, haven't you?
Yeah, I think it's all down to the group that I play with, generally on a weekly basis. None of them were very interested at all in it. It was all fantasy or a little bit of science fiction, but no one was interested, so I didn't really explore it too much. And I had heard it was all gothy, emotional type of stuff. So
lacy shirts, pretty shirts.
Yeah, a lot of role playing rather than rolling dice. My group weren't really into that at the time, so passed me by.
Yeah, so you missed it completely. Wow, that's okay. I mean, I bought a load of stuff. I mean, I remember having so Vampire, I bought Werewolf when it first came out, and Mage Ascension, and Wraith. I think I bought loads of it, but again, it's one of those things that was just I purchased rather than played.
Did all that classic stuff get sold during the
Of
purge?
course it did. It all went. I mean, it was worth a fortune now, but yeah, no, it all went. I think I've still got it on PDF, but it all went. How about you, Kat? 'Cause I think you're sort of a veteran player of Worlds of Darkness, aren't you? And running it as well.
Yeah, I do.
Oh, rude.
I do run one.
Veteran and experienced, not old.
So be fair, I'm getting to that age now. I don't really care if people call me. You've all heard of my rant about the weekend and young people going out being annoying. But no, I missed the first flush of Vampire because at the time when it came out, I wasn't even aware of role-playing games. Really oddly, it wasn't a thing in where I was in Essex at all. There wasn't role-playing. I even went back and Googled to check. There wasn't any role-playing groups, as far as I can see, that ever hit the internet of people remembering to play in Essex around the area I was. But I did catch on to it later on. I first saw the book when I was actually buying my first ever role-playing book. I did see it, picked it up, quite liked it, but the group I was in went, oh no, that's full of edgelords and goths. You don't want to go there. And I do believe they also said wannabe LARPers as well was part of the thing, because I was a little bit, that's a bit hard. So it took
Accurate, though.
years after that until I found a group.
Yeah.
Quite accurate.
It took a little while after that until I found a group. And then basically I do prefer it to other role-playing games. I do prefer the personal reflection, the politics, and the fact you know, it's better to try and get around things without fighting if you can help it. Often.
Tell that to Sam's character Tommy. That was Tommy's go-to. And to be fair, he was quite good at it.
He was very good at it. Oh yeah, he was extremely good at it.
Yeah. So what was your was Vampire your go-to, or was it one of the other games like Mage or Wraith or Changeling or whatever, one of the other Mummy, whatever the other myriad of games there were?
I think there's Changeling. Wraith.
I have tried Changeling. Oddly enough, I'm not a fan of Changeling, mostly because some of the old style canon, which I know they took out in later editions, but because some of it is a little bit creepy. And not creepy in a good way, so they took that out, but I just never really liked it, and I preferred Wraith anyway. I preferred the idea of actually playing someone who has died and that kind of sort of redemption side, rather than running around being a fairy. I didn't really like Changeling. Do you like Werewolf? I like the idea of it more so because I've never played in a game where it's worked well, but I suspect that's because the GM didn't really get behind the ethos of it. They were more a vampire GM, and I don't think they could get behind the werewolf side of it very well.
Well, Werewolf 5th edition has just been announced. Well, it's not been announced. It's actually up for pre-order now. So, and I'm sorely tempted by
I'm
that.
very tempted because I've been seeing the art that's coming out for it. And after what they did with, as I said, with Vampire and with Hunter, I think they're really well done new editions of the game. So I would really like to see what they've done in that because it does look rather awesome.
Yeah, it's got to be done, doesn't it?
I suspect this time, rather than get the disappointment of playing in a game and just having it wrecked for me, I think I might run it because
I can wreck it for you. Don't worry, Kat. I can answer that. Olga, what about you? So you say you were more into LARP than anything else?
Well, when I was a teenager, I was aware of the books, and I remember because I'm from Latvia, and in Latvia when I was kind of growing up, we there's nowhere you can buy these books physically. You can't really buy them. The only way you can get them is you can get maybe a PDF online. So I have not actually seen a physical book until I think I came to UK and saw it in a shop. So it was not even possible to just go to a shop and find out about them. You had to find out about them through your friends who were also into tabletop gaming or any other alternate kind of hobby, sci-fi, fantasy, all that stuff. And I always wanted to play Vampire, but because it's so difficult, so inaccessible to find it, and also it's in English, my first language is Russian, there's a lot of language barriers, so you'd have to know it pretty well. Obviously it's to be translated and stuff, but you'd have to kind of know the people who are playing it to even join any groups, and there's really anywhere advertised it, so it was, I've never really been able to join it, but I really always really wanted to. And whenever I've joined the group, it would kind of just fall apart, or it would just, dissipate, and it'd be kind of always at the end of their cycle of the module or whatever. So
I think so. But you, obviously, LARP, Vampire LARP, you've been well into that for the last, was it say 3 years?
Yeah, last 3 years. Yeah, I joined the local LARP, not local, but in Scotland. I've been playing it over Discord and then played it live as well. I was driving there once a month. So that's based on V20 rules, and that one has actually been running for, I think, a really, really long time. It's a couple of 2 decades, maybe more.
Right,
I don't know.
one of the
It's
older
a
ones
really
then.
long running game,
Yeah.
and it's based on the book, but they're playing it as a LARP. Because there's also the variation of playing these rules as a LARP. I think it's called Mind's Eye Theater.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's not that. They're just basically trying to, convert the book into trying to play it live. So it's like a very, very big tabletop.
A different set. Yeah. Okay, all right. So we've got a sort of a bit of a range of experiences then. So obviously, the game's been around for quite a while and it's gone through quite a few iterations. So the latest is 5th edition. So Vampire 5e, not 5th edition as in Wizards of the Coast 5th edition. It was written by Ken Hite, interestingly. So, or he was the lead writer on it. And interestingly, he always said that he wanted vampires to be the bad guys, and because he wrote Night's Black Agents prior to this, and in that, obviously, the vampires are all bad. And so I think it was quite an interesting turnabout for him to write this. And I think one of the complaints that I've heard is that the old vampire used to be very much sort of superheroes in long black leather coats, whereas in this one, we'll talk about the rules anyway, but I think it seems to be more about that spiral into losing humanity. It's harder to keep hold of humanity. It's more about the beast coming to the fore. Is that something that came through for you, Kat, based on your previous experience?
The retrospection, and they actually don't have it. I don't think they do have it written down in the current V5 book. But the old editions, it was always beast I am, less the beast I become, which it was always supposed to be personal retrospection. But that was never put into the mechanics particularly well. There was always a humanity mechanic, but it wasn't particularly written down well. But what was an awful lot of powers and stuff where you could be Blade if you wanted to. You could be the wizard vampire mage, or casting fireballs while levitating and going through walls. Whereas I think with V5, and to be fair, when I first heard that Kenneth Hite was going to be doing it, I thought, oh God, he hates vampire. Why have they picked him? And then I realised, actually, no, he's actually very good for this, because while he wasn't a big fan of it, and I believe there was a couple of interviews where he's actually said he wasn't. That's the ideal person to go through and cut through an awful lot of tape and doesn't feel the need to historically keep something just because it was there for the last 4 editions. So I think he would go through and he cut down a lot of stuff. Also, mechanics wise, previously the disciplines, they were in the dot formation. But for example, if say Tommy had gone for, I don't know, potent 3, you'd have had anything else underneath. Well, actually, potence is a really bad example of that, but a celerity or something else, you'd have all the dots underneath as well. You wouldn't just pick and choose one power from each bit. That made you very powerful very quickly. Humans were pretty much, they were cattle. You could easily control crowds, etc. And humans weren't very dangerous in some of the older editions, which I always thought was stupid, because they're around, there's a lot of them. They've got guns. They have guns. They can, as I said, within V5, I think the best start for it was the blowing up of the Chancery in Vienna. It basically proved they could do a drone strike and get rid of a mass of kindred in one fell swoop.
Yeah, so vampires aren't the be-all and end-all, are they, anymore? As they used to be.
You are powerful. The fact that for a lot of this persuasion power, etc., you can, if they are just kind, basically you win. But that's a one-on-one basis. Maybe if you get Majesty still, you can basically awe a whole crowd of them. I suspect is what Arwen did. An amalgamation of something similar to that one in the tunnels. So you can do that if you get high enough. But your average starting vampire can't stack the dice to get there. Because in the old editions, if I wanted to do that when I was doing character, you kind of do a one-trick pony. You'd have one of your disciplines, you'd have at a 4 already. Probably nothing else in anything else, and then you just buy the lower disciplines later because it's so expensive to get to 5, and then you just write the table. And you just wipe the table with everything.
The actual the core mechanic of the game. I'll come to you, Sam and Olga, in a second about rules. The core mechanic hasn't really changed. It's a dice pool mechanic. So basically, you sort of as Kat's referred to dots. You end up with you have dots in attributes, so like strength or whatever, and then you have dots in abilities, and basically you end up with a number of D10s. You're just rolling them. Every dice that's above 6 or greater is a success, and it's basically you're trying to get a certain number of successes. So it's very simple. I think that the thing is that there's two things that conspire. So one is that the rule book is not brilliantly put together. There's all the information's in there, but it's all over the place, and it's really easy to get lost. I think they've changed that in Hunter, so the new version of Hunter Reckoning. It's a lot simpler. So there's that, but also, and I know Sam loves this in games, there's lots and lots of subsystems and things that happen in a particular way, which might use the same core mechanic, but they're a little bit different each way. So I don't know. I think we played it for many, many sessions. I think I've just about got my head around the rules now. But
what I prefer with the V5 is that they've done the hunger. So because I play quite a lot of V20, the V20 requires you to remember so many dots, and you have to make your pools in a very clever way. You have to be aware of so many different things that can contribute to your pool, and then they don't really have the hunger, but they have the blood pool there. So your blood pool is dependent on your generation. You can extend it if you're very, very low generation or whatever, and that will kind of help you spend it on different disciplines. So the more blood you have, the more you can spend it on disciplines. So they don't have that kind of you reaching towards the hunger.
Yeah.
Whereas here everybody has the same amount of dice, and you're all going back down to that 0 hunger. You're always you have that timer almost, and that's a thing that helps to me. It helps to play. I know that there's a lot of fans of V20 that I friends of mine who are absolutely hating the whole hunger thing, because they prefer the old system, because it gives you like more freedom and more combinations of things you can do, because like you can spend blood on improving some attributes, or you can.
Who knew gamers preferred previous editions? That never happens. Does it?
Yeah. So yeah, like for me, I prefer the less numbers there are, the better. So the less the numbers you have to remember, and this kind of is a very core thing, because you understand this as a story element. It's not just red juice that you drink to become a superhero. It's an you're cutting down towards that beast, and that makes a better story, in my opinion.
Yeah, cool.
I like the fact with the blood pool compared to V20 and old edition is now you've got under mechanic. Blood is no longer just a resource that you just top up every so often. My older characters would like to have a blood pool of 20. All I've got to do is just make.
Oh, Jesus Christ! 20! Oh my goodness!
I played quite. A few
How many
stages.
did you polarize a lot?
But and also I was high humanity as well, so I played that whole arc instead. So I need to keep topped up so I didn't get hungry and snack on somebody accidentally.
Yeah.
But I love the way that it's variable. So like when Tommy was activating powers, the rouse check, maybe he'll get hungrier, maybe he won't, but you don't know until you do it. Because there was that one time where he was just, as you know, Sam, you were just rolling, high the whole time, and you just went through no problems at all and went out of it just covered in blood, but it was nobody else's and you weren't any hungrier. But and then other times it was you could see the slide where it was going to be, I might get a stain here because I'm going to eat somebody. And I love that, because you didn't have that danger in some of the earlier editions. You do now.
Yeah, there's not a lot to draw on. So what do you think, Sam?
Certainly felt like a balance was struck there. You had to be aware of where you were hunger wise, where you were with the combat that's about to happen, for example. I'm glad we played on Foundry, because I think I still haven't worked out how the critical dice work. I just relied on what the results go.
You and me both, Sam.
I mean, what were those little dots on the? I don't know, but anyway, they're also pretty simple when you break it down. Once you get your head around it, it's just a dice pool system, isn't it? But the subsystems were confusing.
Yeah, I think
the more we played, the easier it got, though. I think we sort of mastered it towards the end.
I think what's interesting, I think mastered it is probably a strong term. We got used to it by the time we finished playing.
It was flexible enough for us to just move along, not get stumbled on the numbers and on the dots, which is all of Empire system. All I think World of Darkness have very clunky, complicated. They make it more is more, and that sometimes gets in the way of playing. And our version of the game that we've run through, we didn't really have that many hiccups. We just kind of Wudolong.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that the combat's supposed to work, and again, I think you can tell that Vampire was a stop on a journey. So, in Vampire, in the rules, there are lots of options around combat. So you can make it as crunchy, well, quite crunchy, or not crunchy at all, which is the way we went. You can tell that in Hunter, which is the 5th edition afterwards, they've simplified it right down. So the way that it works in Hunter and the way that we played it was that, the way we played it generally, was that you had 3 rounds. So whether it be a physical combat or a social combat, you had 3 goes at it generally. And at the end of those 3 rounds, it was right, have you achieved what you wanted to do? If not, you could push it a bit further, and depending on how many of those rounds you won, you could succeed, but you'd more like to take more damage. But it was relatively simple. So, and we did get into a few combats, but I don't think it was never as long as, I don't know, a RuneQuest combat, for example. It wasn't that sort of
well, you didn't want it to be as long because it's so dangerous.
Yeah. Definitely.
I did like the 3 and out system though, because it meant you could use your willpower up early and knew it was available to use early. And really
especially when you had like maybe 2 or 3 combats. I think we had maybe 2 combats maximum per play session, and because willpower did regenerate in between. But again, I think that there's a lot of, I mean, without going into too much detail, there are a lot of things happening. So you made a reference, Sam, to the criticals, so how criticals work, and there's specific dice. I mean, you can use any sort of D10s, but you have messy criticals or bestial failures, or then you've got, as you said, we referred to hunger, which is used to, is using blood to drive your powers. You can use willpower points to reroll up to 3 of your dice, but then some of your dice have got to be hunger dice. So I think, again, core mechanic, but there's lots of stuff hanging on it. And I think, yes, Foundry did a lot of work for us, which was great. I think we would have struggled, well, I certainly would have struggled a little bit more if we were doing it on a tabletop.
I liked some of the streamlining, like this whole sort of 3 rounds and you're done thing, for social combat and for combat, I thought was really good. And there's a lot of the kind of the old layers upon layers of faffiness seem to be something that you could actually quite easily ignore. But then the way that my friends and I always played it is that we played it as supernatural supervillains having a really great time just going around and being chaotic and weird. And so we never really got that deep into those layers anyway, I don't think, as players, because we were far too interested in being cool and slightly edgy and all of those things that now that I'm 50 make me cringe to death a little bit inside. And I'm sure that we'll be talking about some of those cringe moments later on.
I was watching the Matrix Resurrections. I started watching that last night, and then you're looking back at Neo in the 90s. Was it the 90s or whenever it was? It was when Matrix came out, all in long black coats and that sort of thing. It took me right back to The Crow and all that. And I was thinking, that's what Vampire was. But I think in the new system or the version 5 system, yes, they've simplified quite a lot. But I think when we were playing, I was a player in your game, and we were looking at the rule book and was saying, blimey, this is so badly organised. There's bits everywhere, and you can tell that it's much more of a work in progress, really, because I mean, Hunter, the 5th edition, Hunter version 5 is really stripped down. So in Vampire they give you lots of combat options, so you can make it as crunchy as you like. In Hunter, which theoretically could be a more combat heavy game, it's not there. So it's very much that 3 rounds and you're out, that sort of stuff. So I don't know what your thoughts are about when you were trying to GM it and looking through the rule book. I don't know how that struck you.
Well, this was the thing that really surprised me, because to me, Vampire has always been relatively rules light, and it's been more about storytelling, hence calling the GM a storyteller. And everybody likes a good lookup table every now and then, but the point of Vampire is that you could just completely ignore it and just work within dice pools and opposed rolls and things like that, which are actually quite intuitive if you think about it. So I was like, oh, this is really good. The only thing I need to do is count the dots on the page, and that's how many dice I've got. This is really simple. But with the 5th edition rules, they'd obviously decided to add a few little peccadillos here, things like the feeding styles and the concept of blood resonances and things like that, which
dyscrasias and stuff. And I just
Yeah, that the whole thing to me was just like, oh, talk about taking the fun out of the one thing that's actually, this is an economy. Blood is an economy in the game.
Yeah.
And to sort of, add these bells and whistles to it just takes away from the fact that, this is very much a blood and willpower and humanity economy. These are the three things that we'll be marshalling throughout the game. So anything that kind of messes with that and makes that complicated and gives it, the chance for you to talk about, feeling melancholic from someone's blood resonance is just a distraction. And I don't think anybody would really want to have fun and play with that unless you were playing in a campaign that's the size of Fall of London or even bigger.
Yeah.
And you want to play at the kind of pace where every minute of game time takes 20 or 30 minutes to play or more. You'll have been at the table for 4 hours and you'll still be in the first course of your 3-course
Which
meal.
is fine if that's the sort of game you want to play, but who's got time for that when you've got a whole shelf full of games you want to get through, And to be honest, as a GM, I'd probably get a bit bored of that, and I'd probably, some groups would love it, wouldn't they? Really, but I'm interested in what you're saying about that whole, the blood and willpower economy. The willpower stuff is relatively straightforward. I mean, the big change they've made is, as I understand it, is going to hunger dice in this. So you've only got 5 levels of hunger, and then obviously that's got a lot of issues. Did you feel that was sort of constraining in terms of the gameplay, or
am I going to just go back and undo everything that I've just said? Because actually, that one economy, the fact that it's like sanity in Delta Green or Call of Cthulhu, in that you feel like you've got absolutely tons of it, and then very quickly the zero-sum game comes in, and you realise that actually you don't have that much, and it gives you this great urgency. And I think that came across in this game really well, because this is the only time, even though I've played a lot of Vampire, that my character has frenzied and on a hunger frenzy. And it was great when I was like, actually, this is starting to get a little bit hairy. No, this is really hairy. Oh my God, if I roll badly, I'm going to frenzy. Am I going to do it? Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what happens. Let's just throw that in. So that was actually conversely quite interesting. But I think that's because it's a big, deep game mechanic rather than, let's tack an extra subsystem.
There are bits that are you can leave. So I mean, I think the whole thing about blood resonance, that's something that's a bit. I think that's a bit weird to me, because the whole idea about that is you sort of you've got somebody you feed from as a vampire, and you torment them in some way to make them a bit more choleric or what, and that just felt that's wrong. You want to draw a veil over that stuff. You don't, unless you really want to get into that. That just feels a bit odd to me. It feels almost like Cult, the role-playing game, or how I imagine it is. Whereas things like hunger, absolutely, willpower is core. There's stuff like memoriam, which we use a little bit. So the idea being that you could, because your characters in this game, and we'll talk more about this as the setup in a second, but you were long-lived, so you were older vampires, quite powerful, and then for some reason you were put into torpor and you come back out. So the idea being that you've done stuff in the past, and so I quite like that as a mechanic, memoriam, because it sort of gives a bit of depth to your character, which you don't need to write in advance. And we used that a couple of times, but again, it's something that takes you out of group. You have to do it separately, I think, with the player, which so if you're trying to do it in a where you've got a group of 5 around the table or whatever, it's a bit like before everyone else is going dum-de-dum-de-dum-de-dum, while you do your memoriam and get what it is. But I think there's I get the impression that 5e Vampire was very much, we're experimenting, we're going to throw the kitchen sink at it, and we're going to see what works, and then we will take that and adapt it. And I'll be really interested to see what they do with Werewolf version 5.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that whole memoriam thing, to me, felt very Delta Green. It was definitely something that felt like it came from another system or came from outside, rather than being a natural thing that came out of previous World of Darkness stuff. Because it was a bit like, going in and retconning. I mean, maybe we were just using it wrong, because we were using it to sort of, to set up things that we could use kind of there and then and set them up in the past, and that sort of flashback feel. But also, it was quite nice to be able to sort of take us out of our characters and put us into other characters at the same time, which I've seen in things like Traveller. So that definitely felt like it came from a different system. but it'll be interesting to see how much of that kind of stuff makes it into the World of Darkness pantheon of games, and which bits are just going to be vampire only.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about taken from other games. So obviously Ken Hite was the lead writer on 5th edition Vampire, and actually in the back of the book it does stuff that you'd expect that I've seen in Night's Black Agents. So it talks about preparedness.
Precisely, yeah.
But you can see obviously going, oh, I've done that mechanic, let's jam that in here as well. So and I'm definitely not averse to jamming mechanics into games because I do it all the time. But you can see it was really quite obvious, and he'd obviously got hobby. So there's a thing called projects, which we sort of touched on a little bit, which is sort of long-term undertakings by vampires, because they live essentially forever, so they can spend 20 years doing something. Obviously in game that's quite hard to do, but you see where they're trying to get to. They're trying to get that depth of characterization with vampires, but not sure how much of it is practical. So if you try to do everything in the rule book, number one, it's badly organized. Number two, there's too many bits going on, and frankly, I have trouble reading rules anyway. So
Well, yes, I tried to read up a bit on Tony Castelli, the character, before coming in and talking tonight, because obviously I haven't looked at him since we played, and I realised that I've got the rule books, and I realised that all the stuff about the characters in the rule books is white text on black background, which is just the least accessible thing that they could have made it red text on black background. I think that would be the only way to make it less accessible. Yeah, but as somebody who's in between specs at the moment, that was an absolute nightmare. Even in PDF. So let's not talk about the book.
Yeah. It sounds as though we feel as though the rules were pretty good. So I think we were okay. And so for those of you who are coming from, so Sam obviously new to it. I mean, it sounds like you felt it was okay. It worked pretty well.
Yeah, it worked okay. Yeah, I did like the balance that you had to think about quite a lot with it using up your blood and you're having your hunger available. That was quite a good balance to do. So you couldn't. It's quite nice. You couldn't activate your big powers all the time,
or you might be able to keep doing it. So if you're using a power, you have to make a little rouse check. So you rolled a d10, and if it was 6 or more, then your power activated. It would always activate, but it's whether you got hungry while you were doing it. But yeah.
I know towards that last few encounters, Kat and Kay were both high on their hunger stat, weren't they? So didn't really want to be pushing it too hard.
Yeah, and so again, hanging off that, you've got this thing. If you're too hungry and you're in sight of blood, you then frenzy. And I think it's just what's hard is to remember all that stuff. Oh, that triggers this now, and that might do that, and that was quite hard.
I think that's why they're simple. I mean, to be fair, Vampire really combat should have always been quite cinematic and quite short, deadly, and you should always leave it at the point of that was awesome, rather than oh god, what's he going to be doing in his turn type thing that can happen in some very crunchy games.
Yeah.
So I do like the fact that I think the combat was pared down a lot. I know some people like big long combats, like in RuneQuest. I'm not a massive fan of them because people do disengage in a long combat.
Yeah.
It is like, great, it's Sam's turn. I'm going to go make a cup of tea because it's going to be 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Is that just not that you were, but just, that can happen in some other games.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't
in previous edition, if you have high celerity 5, you spend 5 blood and you have 5 turns before anybody else. So a turn could last up to 40 minutes. So we had very, very good cinematic short fights, which I definitely enjoyed. I appreciate that. My attention was,
and I think because it gives you options. So if we'll sort of move off rules in a second, but that they're quite hot on. So opposing NPCs, you can roll for them, but generally they'll say, because that, if you've got a dice pool of 8, for example, you usually going to get 4 successes because it's half. So basically they say, right, okay, that means this character that's NPC fighting against, if you get more than 4 successes, then you beat them. So you don't always have to roll. I think sometimes you can do it to make it, give it a bit of tension, but especially if you're just fighting against, Operation Antigen sort of police or whatever, it's a bit quicker. Right, so we played through the Fall of London. So this is sort of it's. I think one of the things that Vampire was always, as I understand, was really poor at was having good scenarios. So like sort of campaigns that it was tend to be lots of background and lore, but not very many ways. This is how you actually play the game. So I think I was really taken when Fall of London came out. And so the idea is, or the pitch is, that you've got a group of existing and so relatively powerful kindred, so vampires, who have reawoken after some 70 years in torpor, basically in deep sleep, and they awaken in London in 2012 when things are hitting the fan. So Kat referred to this sort of nest of vampires in Vienna, which was firebombed in the lore, and it's the same thing is about to happen in London. So it's all going to hell in London, and the characters are there to sort of to do a particular activity to try and sort of mitigate that a little bit. So I thought it was quite a good setup. I think so thinking it to when I was running the game, because you've got player characters who are amnesiacs, and so one of the problems with Vampire, I think, is just the amount of lore that's in it. And we'll come to Sam in a second, who's a newbie to all this, and see how effective it was. I knew a little bit anyway, and also because I've read the stuff. But I thought Amnesiac PCs, that's great. They were pre-gens, so they were built into the story. And so I was thinking it was a good way to get characters in without too much exposition. But
I think it was a great idea, the setup, how it was going to work for new people. Still pretty confusing with all the game terms that were flying around, because remember I was playing with 3 experienced vamps already.
Yes,
who knew what they were doing. Once we'd worked out the plot, though, I think it was pretty simple. Just get these 5 items. And get for your lord. It's basically a standard RPG plot, isn't it?
It was a 5-room dungeon, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah. So the hardest bit was working out who to trust and avoiding your antigen conflicts. that were going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, I suppose, obviously, how did it? I mean, because I tried to sort of not spoon feed. That's wrong. To sort of pace the. I mean, I'm not a lore expert by any stretch, and I think again we had this conversation we talked about in the RuneQuest episode that we, as you say, Sam, we had people who knew far more than you or I about Vampire, but they were just very generous about saying actually you guys helped out with the lore actually, which was really helpful. But did it feel like you were thrown in the deep end? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I had read up a little bit I'd done a little bit of research on the politics and things that will be going on, but still it was difficult when you come up against people. You've got no idea what sort of power levels these NPCs are going to be at, whether you can push situations or not. So it's not like a traditional RPG where you have sort of levels and things like that, is it?
And did you find the lore, the background to it? Because obviously you got further and further into that as you got into the politics and you got into the sort of the context of the kindred society in London. Did you find it engaging at all?
Yeah, it certainly got a lot easier to work out what to do. And who to trust, who not to trust. I mean, we had a lot of conversations about trusting certain people and not trusting, and then what we could do. I mean, that was all the interesting bit, isn't it? Just discussing how we're going to handle situations. I think it all. I mean, after I played it for 6 months, I certainly got the hang of it.
It wasn't far off 6 months, I don't think, was it? So, finished. Yeah.
I loved the idea of the pre-gens. I think I like a good pre-gen, even though character is probably my favourite thing ever. But I do like a good pre-gen because it forces you to play something that you wouldn't normally play, and it will open up your eyes to different styles of play and different parts of the rules that you don't normally look at, and you can generally have a really good time. So I was quite happy to play whoever in this campaign, knowing that I didn't necessarily need to know a huge amount about that particular clan or whatever, even though I kind of know quite a bit about Vampire. But even then, the stuff that I know is it's kind of pockets of light in the world of darkness, and so there are huge gaps in my knowledge. So yeah, it was good to play this, but I felt that the amnesiac thing it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? In that it is great to be able to come in and claim nothing, but at the same time, some characters and some of the character backstories they're really good for this kind of thing, and some of them aren't. And I really struggled with playing Tony because he is this pragmatic fixer, and I think his bio said something like, the gangster's gangster. This guy is so connected, and I'm like, but he's not, because he's an amnesiac. So you've just completely. He completely got rid of his power base, and not only that, but you've also made him a trans man, so whatever power he has is even more precarious, and he's got nothing, and what are you going to do with that? Whereas I think when we were looking at Dr. Banerjee, Kat's character, because he already had a ghoul that was loyal to him, and he already had a haven, and because, you know, he was set up to be this kind of complete weirdo, it didn't really matter. And I think it's the same with Lady Catherine as well. The Ventru, she's a Ventru. It doesn't matter what she remembers because she's got her whole Ventru structure. So some of it really worked. And I really struggled with Tony a lot. Because I wasn't too sure how to play him. And I don't think it was until the last 3 sessions that I worked out who he was and how I was going to play him and how I was going to use his desires and his drive and all of those things that you know, were great and interesting. I didn't even have a clue what to do with him for a long time, even though I've played Vampire a lot. And I felt that that's actually, you know, it put a lot of pressure on you as a GM to fill in things. And the stuff that I've read since, now that I've gone back into the campaign and read through it, I'm like, well, all of this stuff is great, but the pressure on the storyteller to bring that up at the right time.
It was really hard.
It was, and you can't rely on the player to keep hold of it and then bring it up at the same time, because a lot of the time they don't even know and they're not meant to know. So I felt that was a little bit tricky. It was interesting, but I think in gameplay terms, it showed possibly a lack of testing.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. A lot of these, you know, so-called great campaigns, so things like the Nyloth, you know, Masks and Nyloth, and etc., they've been play tested for, you know, 25, 30 years and multiple iterations, multiple versions. These, you know, other campaigns, they just don't get that level of exposure. So, you know, and I get the sense that this was very much a home game, or that had been written up obviously by people who were, you know, committed, and there's a lot of creativity in there as well. But there were massive holes in there that, you know, I think so. Sam's character, I think, sat well with him, and I selected him for him because I knew that it was relative. Not that Sam's not capable of playing straightforward characters, but if you're in a setting you don't really understand, having somebody got immediate hooks to put them onto, that's helpful. Whereas, you know, Tony, you're right, absolutely. There's stuff there that you need to spend a lot of time generating or working on, like networks and that sort of thing, which we didn't really have, although we played it for 6 months. You know, there's a lot to get through. And again, you know, the main theme of the campaign in my mind is, you know, are you who you think you are? You know, that's the thing. So you think you're this, actually, are you that? Are you under the influence of somebody else or something else? And I think, you know, the memoriam thing, eventually it was like, oh, drip, drip, drip. And then I just thought, oh, sod it. And I just opened up the journals and could just read it, you know, because it's like, it was hobbling so much of what we needed to do and what you wanted to do. So yeah, I think it was a great idea. I think I would, if I was going to run it again, I would do it differently. And I think probably set the characters up differently as well. Again, you know, experience and hindsight is always good. What about Kat, Olga? What are your thoughts?
I think it worked quite well. As I said, I did find it a little railroady myself, coming from other vampires, and that's nothing to do with you. That's just, I suspect, how it's written, because I think it is an introductory to the lore, and therefore I think they need to do sort of set pieces as per se. So it's not quite as open sandboxy as I would have normally played. But I thought it worked really well for getting people introduced. Also, even though I know a lot of the lore from the world of Vampire, doesn't mean that's going to be V5's lore. So it is quite nice to have little refreshers on things. As I said, I enjoyed it the whole way. I'm still not entirely too sure that anyone waking up with amnesia who went into torpor 70 years ago are going to be that great on the street without making it pretty obvious they're out of it.
Especially when you've got a sort of government agency which are making it progressively more difficult for you. So, you know, although you wouldn't know, your characters wouldn't know what mobile phones were, you shouldn't be using them anyway. So, and I think there's a lot of craps and difficulties in there, which as a GM, it's try. It was a pain in the arse, some of it, frankly, to try to keep that going.
I think a lot of people would hand wave some of it, and a lot of, if you've got a pedant in your group, you are going to suffer with this game. That's all I would say. But if you've got people just go with the flow and go, yeah, fair enough, I'm sure that somebody will quickly show you how to use a mobile phone. Hell, you know, my grandmother can learn to use an iPhone type thing. I'm not sure we've ever got handed iPhones, but maybe Lady Catherine did, because she was rich enough to get an iPhone. I might have been lucky to
I have people for that. Why would I use a phone?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What did you think, Olga, in terms of
Um,
playing a regen and sort of the whole setup, really?
I mean, I don't actually know the lore that well. I don't think I know the lore very well. I've spoken to a lot of people who know lore, and I kind of picked things up and I read some stuff, but it doesn't mean that my brain actually retained a lot of it. So just some of it I do remember. And it was very interesting to play because I've played a lot of V20, so it actually kind of connected pretty well for me because of V5 I've played very little before, very few sessions, and so I couldn't remember very well the lore of V5. So it was actually really good for me because I could go, I am this snobby venture from almost like a V20 mindset of lore. So I don't
Yeah.
know anything, and I have my old school ideas of how things were and what they are different now. So I need to learn really fast. Another thing I was going to say about the whole the people waking up from torpor and being on the street, it ended up more like a action movie than a slow burn TV show for me, I think.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing, it's a good thing. It's you know, you do want that really cool kind of, you know, you have to learn on the spot the lore and the setting and you know, have to react and stuff, which is quite interesting to play. Not what I expected at all.
Yeah. I think I mean, so on reflection, as I say, look at it and think, oh, that worked really well. I think, as you say, Kat, there are challenges doing it in play, and it was very straightforward. The scenario was, you know, get the things for this guy, you know, this individual, and then take them to him, and then make decisions at the end, which may or may not be poor ones. You know, that's pretty much how it works. But I think because your characters were meant to be quite powerful kindred before you went into torpor, it meant that when you woke up, it was like, well, there's things you would have known. So to really race, I got the sense to just get you up to speed, and we hand waved a lot of it, and you jump straight into the politics, the setup of London itself.
I mean, another thing with the vampire world, right, is that you build up a lot of contacts and backgrounds and resources over time. That's a very big part of the power of the old elder. You know, we were Ancilla, we weren't elder, but the older you get, the more resources you get, contacts and boons and stuff, and that gives you quite a lot of power to leverage to do things slow, or you know, to manipulate the plot, which we were like thrown in deep end. So we didn't have any of that. So that actually freed quite a lot for us because we didn't have to make any choices with that as well. It was different.
I think in terms of game time, although we played for quite a long time in real time, I think it was probably about 2 weeks from waking up from torpor to actually completing the whole thing. And so, as you say, there's no way you could build up that level of you know, the backgrounds. But I think, I mean,
that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah. I think there's just different ways of running it, because, you know, obviously vampires live forever unless they get, you know, on the wrong side of somebody. But I think it would have been quite an interesting alternative way to do it. Would be, you were a newly created coterie that were created specifically for this purpose, and so you didn't know the ins and outs, but also because you didn't know the ins and outs, no one knew who you were as well, and so you could operate a little bit behind the scenes. And I think that you'd learn as you went in the game, rather than an awful lot of, as you remember, before you went to the torpor, this person was the key, that, you know, the prince of London, whereas now they're like this, and it was like I'd say I enjoyed it. I think it was good fun. I think there were this is an issue with a lot of campaigns, isn't it, really? Unless they're real classic campaigns like Masquerade, Thotep, or whatever it might be, they don't get a lot of playtest before they're published, inevitably. And I got the sense with this one, it was one where it was, you know, somebody's very passionately played home campaign that they'd written up, and that you could tell that there were gaps in there, which, you know, and you always have to do that. But anyway, I think you know, a lot of campaigns like this, but I could see it. I could see the holes for
I agree. I think there was a lot. I'm not sure if it's someone's home game or it was a game that they put together to showcase, and it's nearly there, but it kind of feels like it was, at some points it does feel a little bit like, oh, we have a deadline.
Yeah.
And that kind of really comes across a little bit. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but it feels a little bit like it.
And we kept having those visions as well.
Yeah, memoriams. I was going to say that was a good tool.
Which I couldn't really work out why the visions were there to show us what happened in historically past. What was it there for? Just an opportunity for us to roll some more dice. But
yeah, so the way it's written in the game, okay, is that you're supposed to have this memoriam. There are actually an awful lot more than you guys went through. I just crossed out a whole load and thinking irrelevant. Because so what you could do is okay, this is for listeners. So basically, as these guys were heralds, so these were vampires who'd partaken in blood from a whole range of elder vampires. So the idea was that their personalities to some extent been overwritten by these other elder vampires. So really the idea was they didn't know who they were. So the memoria, whatever, were essentially memories from these vampires of blood that they'd partaken from. And it was meant to sort of show the history of the main antagonist, Mithras, this sort of extremely powerful vampire, over time, and to sort of give you views of perhaps he's not the guy that you think he is, perhaps there's bad things, obviously he's a vampire. So that was the idea, and you could do, and in the book it talks about, you say, right, you go into a memoriam and you can use your willpower and use your skills, and I'm thinking you don't want to be wasting willpower and hunger dice in a dream, because that just seems ridiculous. So I skated over most of that, which is why I'm thinking if I was going to run it again, I probably would run it with newly created vampires, because then you wouldn't have the memoria, you'd have and maybe do it over a longer in-game period, so there's a bit more of a build up to it, so you do build the contacts, the dice, the resources, but yeah, it was a bit of an aside, really, I think.
Yeah, but you could do that, I mean, and then just make it that the second Inquisition are a little bit dimmer, so they don't catch on to you quite so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, my only curiosity is I do have Fall of London that I didn't read because I was playing in this.
You can read it now. It's all the bits I missed out.
Yeah, hang on. I haven't got to that bit yet, but I would, if you're going to do that, I think, because one of the big things out of the new vampire world is a lot of the elders have been called to battle, or a mythological thing going on. Does anybody in the London court have a bit of an issue with diablerie? Because if you're new vampires and you're not known, and they need to drink kindred blood to stop them from going there, they're going to drain you lot. They're just going to treat you as a little blood bank and just go, I'm going to pick this one and drain it and kill it. And that's a bit of
but I mean, that's the thing where you just, there's a bit of GM fiat there, isn't going to actually, hey, do we make this playable?
That's your extra danger,
Yeah.
Is somebody hunting you lot down?
Or somebody's always hunting. I mean, I am going to run, or I've offered to run a sort of a short session, sort of 3 or 4 sessions for the dice and for Blythe, etc., because they're with their vampire curious side of things, and I'm going to run them as sort of in London, just pre 2012, so a bit of sort of almost like as a prequel thing to it, and they will be newly created, so there'll be neonates in that, so that'll be a different, because you've already got the sort of the political background set up. I mean, vampire, it's a game of angst and, staring into, well, obviously you can look in the mirror because vampires can use mirrors now. But there's also politics is supposed to be a big part of the game. Did that come through?
Yeah, it did a lot. And I think that's why I felt that my character was really out of place within that, because it was very much about the Camarilla and the politics of London. And obviously with the whole sort of Mithras thing, but I felt that as a Brujah, you're constantly railing against this, so you can't spend too much of your time ingratiating yourself with anybody because you're too busy being angry about stuff. And I think ping-ponged between extremes of playing Tony as the sort of is it Ed Sheeran, is that his name? Sort of like Klaus from the Umbrella Academy, that kind of charming eccentric, that sort of going between that and trying to bring out his kind of Brujah fury. And I felt that certain clans are really good, like with the Ventru. I think that Olga played Lady Catherine so well, so well, and Kat, of course, even though she was playing is it Ravnos?
No, it's
Hecata. Yeah, it's Hecata, that's it. Yeah. So Kat playing the Hecata race clan, I thought was also really interesting because for them politics is a big part of this, but for the Brujah, you're just sort of counterculture, counter politics. You are the counter to everything else, and it was almost impossible to play that with the amnesia and the lack of a power base and the lack of connections, which is why I don't know how much we can spoiler, but later on when the familial connection comes in, I clung to that like a drowning cat in a river, because I was like, this is the thing, this is where where I can play a bit of politics. And so I felt that was good then. But yeah, it was, I got the tough character, I think, in terms of politics.
I think it did when we had to speak to people. The problem is that a couple of the people that we needed to get items from were never at court. So you kind of avoided the court. You kind of avoided going to Elysium that often. We only went a handful of times. I mean, my favourite time was still, I have to say, was Tommy telling his Primogen that he's a piece of shit. That is going to be forever my favourite piece. But we didn't go to Elysium that often. Politics start to play in. There was a lot of people privately trying to do deals with us separately on the odd occasion, like the word, but that was away from court.
And a lot of politics does happen at court.
Yeah, I kind of think the Shard blew up a bit too soon in a way.
Yeah, and I think, that's the way that, so you've got these 5 essentially different scenarios which you're playing at, and you can choose to do them in any order. But I think you're right. I think, if you've got a stable kindred, or kindred size, stable as it gets anyway, then you do go to court, and court is a very formal affair, Elysium, and you meet your Primogen, and, there's that sort of, verbal fencing and stuff. You didn't really get that at all, because, as you say, in the game, spoilers, Operation Antigen hit the Shard, which is where the main, where Elysium takes place, essentially the court of the Prince of London, and that was it. It was gone. So
I think what we got though was and that's a very Vampire the Masquerade thing of, there is a bigger game going on, the feeling of there is such a big world, it's so complicated, interwoven, that we've touched some things, we've noticed that some Primogen don't like some other ones, and there's power games going on, but they're so above our pay grade that it's not a problem. They are just not a problem. We just try to do what we can do, and that's also a very big feel of playing a vampire thing. So there was that feel of the world. If we had more like in-game time to go to court a few times to do the social side of it, which wasn't part of the module, which is fine. But I think we could have definitely. There's so much. It felt like there was so much that we could have, could have manipulated people, talked to them, come up with schemes. As somebody who played Event True, like schemes. This is the place we would do this. Oh, now it's gone. Okay.
Well, was that because we picked the wrong order?
No, not at all. There is no wrong order.
For example, if we'd gone to the Word first, and after his really horrible offer where Tommy wanted to kill him, and we all wanted to kill him, to be fair, if we'd done that, but then had to go to Nicholas to ask for the favour, could you get the item from him, please, and we'll owe you. We could have been owing a very big favour really early on. Yeah,
and that was one thing I was a bit disappointed by, because I thought, because as you learned, Sam, so boons, prestation, this whole thing about sort of giving and receiving of favours is a massive thing in Vampire. And as you say, Kat, that really came right towards the end, and I didn't get a chance to do anything with that at all. I mean, I think more reflection on I think Fall of London is a great book. I think there's a load of good stuff in it. I think it's got some good examples of things, how games might be. I think, weirdly, I'd rather use it as a source book rather than a scenario pack. And usually, as I said right at the start, the complaint usually is they used to do a lot of source books but no scenarios. So weirdly,
because the setting and the various sources that you've got in terms of interesting people and NPCs and stuff like that was absolutely great, and that was the bit that was really fascinating to me. But I felt that because we had this mission and these artifacts to find, that as a coterie we were very much on point. And I think was it only like 7 or 8 or 9 in-game nights that we did over 6 months?
I think it was about 14 nights. So
was it 14?
Something like it wasn't
2
very,
weeks. We didn't spend too much time at Elysium talking people's ears off. We were out getting things done and ticking boxes and kicking ass and taking names and getting very, very hungry. So perhaps we didn't play the politics as much as we could have done, but also we were down our Tremere, weren't we? We were going to have a Tremere character, and I think if we'd had the Tremere back in the coterie, that would have driven a little bit more of that politics than what we had.
Well, that used to be the thing, it used to be the whatever city by night. Your city may vary.
I think I want to do Birmingham by night. That'd be quite good.
I have to say, I did like the city layout and how they seem to divvy up bits between different fractions and people, what people claimed, was quite nice. I thought that was really well thought out from what I could see.
Domains and stuff,
Bit of a cliche with like Nosferatu in the sewers, or in the underground rather, but the prince claiming the actual city of London just makes so much sense. And all the I'm sure if we'd gone to track other various people, their bits, they'd have probably, I think, sat quite well with London. It seemed quite well laid out.
I was hoping that because there's lots of green areas in London as well, which are claimed by the lupines, by the werewolves, and I was hoping at some point you go blundering along in there, but I think maybe Sam's character's by himself, possibly. But I think the rest of you would go, don't go into the trees. There's monsters in there.
Yeah, no. Squishy Ventru, no.
I mean, obviously, so you've gone back and you've had a look at the 4 London books. I know you've had it all the way through, and you didn't read it until we got to that point. So I suppose, given your reflections, if you were going to run it yourself, what would you do differently? I think, what would your advice be to somebody if they were going to run 4 London?
That's a tricky one. I think I'd be very careful about mixing players who know a lot about vampire and the lore with those who don't. I think it's absolutely essential that there's a good mix, and we were really fortunate, I think, to have Sam with his kind of fresh perspective on this.
Yep.
But if we hadn't have had Olga, who knows so much more about vampire than I do, and possibly me and Kat put together, I think it might have been problematic at times, because she definitely drove things on when we were all sort of going, oh, the politics is a bit tricky. What would my character do here? She'd be like, well, I know what the Ventru would do. This is sort of simple and straightforward. So make sure that your players are a good mix.
Yeah,
would
definitely.
be the first one. The next one, I was going to say, the next thing I'd do is have some kind of visual relationship map. That was one of the things that I really loved about working with you on the VTT, was that we had this wonderful visual map of connections of people, of who's who and what their connections are, because unless there's some way of visualizing it, newer players are going to get lost completely. And if you've missed a couple of sessions because real life got in the way, and you come back and you're going, who was that again?
Who's the Primogen? What's the Harpy do? What's Elysium again? Because there is a torrent of terms, and I think you've got the risk of which I think we avoided because of the quality of the players we had. That whole thing about RuneQuest, it just feels so massive that people they don't want to do it wrong, and so there is a certain pressure around both as player and as a GM to do it right, if you like. But I think yes, we had people who got a lot of experience in playing, but everyone was there was no, well, actually, you'll think you'll find. There was none of that, Actually, a Banu Hakim wouldn't do that or whatever. Who knows? So we didn't get that. So I think, it worked really well. But I think you're right. You need to have people who are, there to share their knowledge rather than impose it, which could get messy. Okay, right. So time's running on. So from your perspective, what was your favourite scene or element in the game? What was it what was the thing that sort of you'll remember, if you like, apart from the complexity of playing a Brujah for once?
I think what I will remember inevitably is when the rolls go wrong and we all got very, very hungry. So it's when we were down in the underground, trying to get through to De Word, and we were in a very bad place, literally and figuratively, and we were all getting hungrier, and there was nothing but duplicity everywhere, and I decided to just roll with the bad roll and let Tony frenzy. That for me is hugely memorable, because it is the first and only time a character has got into a full-on hunger frenzy, and also because at the time I felt really awful. I was like, I shouldn't have let this happen, but I just wanted to. But I wanted to see what would happen.
Dramatic. Yeah.
It was extremely dramatic. But then I did the classic Joss Whedon thing, which is where you set up a huge piece of drama and emotional resonance, and then you undercut it by putting some humour back in. So the fact that the Nosferatu had to essentially take off his big black leather coat and wrap Tony in it like you were trying to give a cat a pill, just so that he could control Tony enough to get him out of there for his own damn good.
That's right. Yeah, and they staked you. to sort of keep you quiet, didn't they?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, they did, and we
yeah.
had to do some fancy footwork there with torpor and
With
what
the
should
law.
and shouldn't happen. Yeah.
You read that, and we're actually not quite sure. But at that point, that was a point where it was a real inflection point in the story, because obviously for listeners, you'd been pinned down by Operation Antigen, so essentially hunters ready to take down the vampires, and I was all ready for you to race after them and then get staked and then dragged away to a rendition site. And then I thought it was going to go down a route of where you're going to be essentially pawns of the Operation Antigen. And so I was all ready for that to happen, but it didn't. And I went, oh, that would have been so good. Anyway,
So I did have a moment of, it's what my character would do, which we know players say that when they do stuff that they know is stupid. And I'm like, I know this is stupid, but I can't stop myself. And I was quite happy for it to go that way. If it was going to be the end of Tony, I would have happily saluted him and gone on to pick up another character and come back as somebody entirely different. But it was one of those sort of real critical moments where you're like, oh, what's going to happen now?
But that's fun. I mean, that's why we play with dice, isn't it? Rather than just tell a story. So you roll the dice and see what happens, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
I think my favourite scene was probably. There's actually been a couple, to be honest. But I do think one of my favourite scenes was actually pretty much nearly the last one, with the reveal of Mithras and the fact that I'm kind of guessing that how he kind of got dug up or found again or out of his torpor was due to a bunch of Sabbat kind of meandering around, and he's kind of taken them over. And I just love that grand reveal. It was really well done.
And that's written into
betrayal as well. We were waiting for betrayal, and we got betrayed by our own coterie members.
That was a classic one.
That was classic. I mean, it was
beautiful. I loved it. We split in half, didn't we?
Yeah, and the best thing was pretty, because my character divvied out items to people, and the person who betrayed us, I deliberately gave them the item knowing that their grandsire had been guarding it, and it was just like, you get.
I was sitting there, and when you were doing that, I was thinking this is going to go great, because I was Discord chatting Kay while she was doing that. So that was good fun. But the reveal the reveal about Mithras and how he'd sort of become its physical form again. That's as it's written, essentially. I was really pleased that worked out pretty well.
It was inevitable, wasn't it? It was absolutely inevitable, because for me, one of the weaknesses of Vampire is this whole concept of multiple different clans getting together in coteries, the sort of relationships of convenience and pragmatism, and then somehow all being loyal to each other and #family and all that. I'm a bit like, well, that's not what would really happen. We'd all sort of be there for a while, and eventually it would all fall apart. And I'm very glad that when it happened, that was done with great grace and good humour around the table by the players. Because sometimes people can get very precious, and I don't think any of us were very precious with our characters at all.
No, it's good. Great. What I liked was, and I think the point about the coterie. So, because the characters, the heralds of the sun, are being sort of bound together to essentially to do this particular task, which is to deliver these artifacts to this powerful old ancient vampire. Once you've done that, then it basically those old tensions split it apart immediately, and that for me, I thought actually that's classic Vampire right there. Really,
it is, isn't it? Yeah, and we were, because Heralds of the Sun, we were a manufactured band, so that was always going to fall apart at some point. It was just when and how, and it was really nice to see that those little seeds of dissent had been planted in the character histories right from the start, and it wasn't until, spoilers, Mithras returns that we would actually have to put our money where our mouth is and make a decision one way or the other. So yeah, I was actually very pleased that we split 50-50 in the coterie. I think had we done like 3 against 1, it might have felt really quite awful, but because it was quite equitable, it meant that any sort of loose PvP that we did have was mostly quite jovial, and I really enjoyed that.
What about you, Olga?
I mean, I really like the last scene, but in general, it was so different for me to play a Ventru. It's a very different mindset to like high humanity characters I've played before. That I really enjoyed being a bad guy, because I have played against people like that, characters like that. I know exactly how annoying and evil they sound and horrible they sound. And like just being a snobby Ventru. Like there was the scene in the beginning where we had to give a gift to Queen Anne, and we gave her that beautiful teapot, I think, with a note where the Anarch's Baron second in command is or something.
Yeah,
Like
that's
that
right.
whole setup of like there's a secret within a secret, but there's a physical object, but also there's information is important, and that kind of exchange. That's like kind of classic. We are giving you this as a symbol. We are trying to weave a story that to give her a gift, and then we know that there's probably going to be more than that involved in that political kind of exchange.
Wheels within wheels.
Yeah,
Doing it
well,
with
yeah,
style.
and you always think that you're trying to think ahead of time, but you know that you're probably going to be outsmarted by them anyway. There's like a bigger game happening, and you're a pawn. Just to feel that feeling.
No, I think
So yeah.
it was great. I
And there
think
was another interesting conversation that we had, which I really enjoyed, which was a classic kind of also humanity, morality thing in between the coterie. Remember when I think we were discussing what to do with the thin bloods, and we
That's
had
right.
very diametrically opposite views within the coterie of, because you've asked us, each one of us, so that we can, make our thoughts known to the rest of the coterie. And I just remember just saying the words, like how evil they sound. It's just how exactly horrible and
Lady
insane
Catherine was a definite vampire supremacist. I think it's
she
fair to
was.
say.
Strong
So,
and
yeah.
stable, very evil. Eradicate the thin bloods. Camarilla fanatic kind of. That's how I played her. But I really enjoyed that roleplay. Like it wasn't crucial to the overall plot. It wasn't crucial to solving anything. But to me, that was kind of that dynamic, that being able to roleplay with other coterie mates about our fundamental morals was quite fun, and I really like that. That's like fundamentals, I think, of vampire kind of good vampire games. That those social kind of dilemmas and dialogues.
Role playing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah, you don't need any
That really
numbers or
revealed
character sheets
itself.
for that. Yeah, you literally need
revealed itself at
morals.
the end, didn't it?
Yeah, it did, and it did. It was that conversation kind of gave us the foreshadowing of what will happen, because we said our diametrically opposite kind of thoughts, and that's how we split at the end as well. So that kind of was small, but if it was like a series or a film or something, it would have been quite a important little kind of
The lead into it.
Yeah. And it just occurred because we were talking about it. We literally did not need to do that at all. There was no roles. It was pure social role play.
That's all good. Because as you say, right in the last session, the coterie, the group split red in the middle, and in fact they were attacking each other, which I was rubbing my hands with glee, thinking this is great. So at the end, it's fine in the last session. Maybe earlier in the PvP is a bit more of an issue. Right, Sam, over to you. What about your favourite scene or favourite element of the series?
Well, I decided quite early on that if I didn't understand what was going on, I was just going to role play it quite hard anyway. So that's why midway through, when Tommy, my character, encountered the London drag scene, and having been in Torpor for 70 years, this seemed to be something completely new and completely liberating. So he decided that's an interesting way to go. So that's why Miss Tess Tickles emerged like a butterfly, and Tommy changed into a drag queen halfway through, which unexpected interesting development.
Unexpected
I think
for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, I think everybody was quite shocked and surprised by that particular turn. But it was a really interesting, really useful way of covering up the telltale taint of a Nosferatu with the super amount of makeup, and it helped my first performance ever on stage was a critical role as well.
That's right, critical success. It was your singing was amazing, and so impressed by it. But
that was my favourite bit. I think. It was good fun. Your 7 foot tall drag queen attacking a antigen agent dressed in leopard skin. Yeah, miniskirt and a beehive hairdo. Yeah,
somehow that made it slightly more terrifying. I think if you'd just been going as an Nosferatu, and the fact that in itself, just there's whole layers that I can't really unpick within that of horror. But it was all good. It's all good, and it wasn't. It was funny, but it wasn't played for laughs particularly. It was just one of the things.
No, I mean, Tommy always always tried to, because he was a dangerous soldier. He'd always tried to have a sort of empathetic side as well, because he had his what was the name of that thing the cafe girl who he looked after?
Oh yeah. So his touchstone. That's right. That was another thing we never really got into in the rules. Touchstones.
And Lady Catherine, of course, he'd fed some blood to keep her from going.
Yep. She got blood bonded.
So tried to be a bit empathetic with all that sort of stuff. So I thought, why not?
No, it was all good. It
worked.
Definitely memorable. Definitely memorable.
What was
Okay,
your
now,
favorite scene to run?
my favourite scene to run. I liked when you guys were in the sewers and you were wandering around looking for a Nosferatu ancilla, I think it's fair to say, like an elder, and sort of coming across all sorts of weird and wonderful people. That was quite good fun. I think what was great about it was that we saw a lot of interplay between the characters, and that there were differences of opinions, and it shows that, you know, coteries can be very different. And that often they're just thrown together for, you know, without, you don't want to be the same clan, is what I'm saying. You know, I think you can run sort of, or have scenarios, have games where, you know, actually there's a bit of conflict. As long as it's not enough to spoil the game, then it's all good. And in fact, it's part of the vampire, isn't it? I mean, in terms of future plans with World of Darkness or 5e, so I mean, I suppose, Sam, is it something would you play again? Would you consider running it? Is it something that, or is it more of a you've done that now and put that in a box and put that away?
I'd definitely play it again. I don't think I'd consider running it. It's not really my type of game for running. But yeah, I'd definitely have a go, especially on some one shots or some short campaigns. Yeah. Especially Werewolf, which would be a bit more combat orientated, I guess.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go and pre-order after this recording now, aren't I? What about you, Olga? What are you?
Yeah. I really liked V5. I definitely love to play more V5. I think I'd want to play something that's less of a linear module, but more of had more time for sandboxy machinations and plans and longer kind of.
It's definitely a game that would reward like a long time. I mean, we played it for probably a good 6 months, but I think it's sort of campaign or sort of game that
we
really
started in June 2022. We started.
Did we?
So we played almost a year.
Wow, but I think I think it almost like feels like it's a pretty good couple of years to really get to squeeze the juice out of a game like Vampire. But who's got time for that, frankly? So
I would definitely play more Vampire, the V5 edition, especially because it have all the new stuff with the Thin Bloods. Because Thin Bloods as well, don't they have the alchemy as well? That side is I know that exists. I don't know the mechanics behind it, and the the clans have been completely changed now. It's all simplified, so it'd be definitely interesting to play. I don't know about Werewolf. I've tried Werewolf before, and it's fun, but I don't know if that would be my thing. Wraith, and I don't know if they've redone Wraith. I know Wraith is very complicated. It's there's also the demons as well.
There's a million games out there. Millions.
Fae I've tried before, and I don't think I'd play it again because again it's more complicated. Vampire, I think V5 has been the most kind of simplified kind of.
Yeah, be interesting to see what they do with Werewolf, especially with it, potentially or more potential for physical combat in that. But I suspect they'll still keep it pretty simple because they have with Hunter. So yeah,
I'll definitely play some more Vampire just because now that I've realised that there are challenges to plans, it's high time that I got out of my comfort zone with that. But at the same time, I also think that I've been playing Vampire wrong this whole time, and that really I should have been spending way more time on the politics, which frankly I'm not that interested in. So if I do play, because it is it's okay, but I'm more interested in setting and interesting cool places and playing with your disciplines and things like that. So I think that if I were going to run Vampire again, I would probably run it wrong in the way that I've always run it wrong.
Your Vampire may vary. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, precisely. So if I was going to run it, I think there'd be a whole lot of stuff that I would ignore or continue to ignore. But in terms of World of Darkness, though, it has given me hope that the way that the system works and the complexity and stuff is something that they're now very aware of and that they're changing. So hence, looking forward to Werewolf. Probably won't go back to Mage, but if there's interesting things,
with version 5, they might. With it.
That's true. Or if something interesting happens with Wraith or whatever, happy to have another go with that. Wolf is definitely on the horizon.
Well, I have pre-ordered Werewolf 5th edition. So when that comes through, and you're on the list if you want to play that one. So that'll be good fun.
I will absolutely play that one, but I will have to look at all of the various clans, tribes, and make sure that I'm of the correct tribe to be able to role play it.
Find the right one.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Thanks, Kay. That was brilliant. So that's great. So I'll just slot that in. And what about you, Kat?
I will continue to play vampires. I been playing it for years now, so I'm probably, to be fair, I really do like V5. I think it's pared it right down. It's a lot easier to bring new people in.
Yep.
And I'm really enjoying it. So, although I will still play the older editions on the odd occasion, I'm sure, but because I own the books and I can do so. I've got Hunter at the moment, and I'm looking at trying to figure out a short campaign for that. And I do want to try the werewolf because I like what they've done with V5. Hunter the Reckoning is actually now more playable. I like the fact that hunters are no longer really supernaturally endowed.
Yeah.
Because that always to me kind of didn't work in my head. It was like, well, how can you hunt them for being that? And you yourself.
You hypocrites.
Yeah, it was a little bit like that. And it was a little bit like, I remember, you kind of look at it and go, really? We're going that route, are we? So I like that. I do want to try. Either running a game of that or playing in it. So I probably will try werewolf. I've had some pretty poor experiences of werewolf in the past. But I kind of think the new edition's probably going to really hit it out the park.
Hope so. If you pre-order it, you get the PDF early, so we'll find. And I think it's supposed to be physical copies at Gen Con, so I'm sure we'll probably get physical copies in the next month or so, probably. PDF the next month or so. So, yeah. Watch this space in a future podcast recording. All right. Thanks very much for recording.
Thank you.
Ish. Thanks, Olga. Hope you feel better soon. Take it easy, Sam. Thanks, Kat. And I'll see you again. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Nice one.
All right. So, thanks very much for playing, guys. I think that was quite challenging for all of us in terms of
I think for you most of all, Steve.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily want to talk about the rules because the rules are what they are, but just interested to hear your thoughts about engaging with the setting and the whole concept of it. Because I really think this is just completely outside your guys. Not so much Sam. Sam's played it before, but for your guys from a comfort zone perspective. I mean, where did it feel like? I felt like it wasn't really your cup of tea. It's fair to say.
I think it's probably one of the most difficult games I've played in terms of the role playing, because I think the two things with it. One is all the machinations of all the different factions that you've got to kind of try and get your head around a bit. That's a bit of a barrier, I think, sometimes. But I think the other thing is, and I think you picked up on this, Steve, last time with the issue around his daughter being sort of embraced. What would your characters think versus what would you think? So I've felt all the way through it a bit conflicted, because you're constantly not wanting to be a baddie.
Yeah.
You're not wanting to be a baddie. Like Maggie, I created a character who's a consensualist. She goes to the blood bank. She's not biting people in the neck. And then as we were playing it, I'm thinking, yeah, but she's a vampire. She's a vampire. Like you used to. Why would we object to turn his daughter into a vampire? Why would we? We would, but our characters wouldn't. So from a role-playing perspective, because it's an odd thing with role-playing games, isn't it? You play characters that you sort of think are a bit dark or you think are a bit dodgy, but they're not really. You tend to play the goodies. Even if they're a bit ambiguous, you tend to play the good guys.
Yeah.
And in this, you don't, do you? And I found that quite difficult for me, personally.
Yeah.
Yep. I'd agree with that. I thought it was tricky being the bad guys, or rather, like being encouraged. Not by you, Steve, but like the system is such that you kind of have to do bad shit just to keep going. So I got more into it towards the end when it just became a more political sort of can you stitch it up game, and I'd go one further than Blythe and say the other thing that was layered on top of that was the kind of secret agendas that you all had, which I mean that again. And I'm not a big fan of player versus player, but then this game kind of seems to set you up for that. And I'm not,
To a certain extent, I mean, I think, if we were playing a longer, because a lot of the systems in the game sort of play over a long period of time. We're talking months, years, etc. And you can do a lot of that, but obviously that's not where we were coming from. So, So I don't think it has to be player versus player, but I think it's you know, because you're vampires, you're predators, aren't you? So you're always going to be trying to get one up on each other. But yeah, I think I was just reflecting that I think if you're playing vampires in a fantasy world, you wouldn't think twice about it so much. As you're playing vampires in London, in the real world, and you can visualize real people, which is, you know, where it's set, that becomes much more of a challenge.
I think that's true. You're right there. From an imaginative perspective, because it's the real world. So, like the policeman's daughter, it's not a real teenage daughter. It's all I know it's all made up, of course it is, but it has a certain. I think, like you said in one of the message groups, Martin, it feels a bit on the nose.
Yeah.
It's like people smuggling. It makes perfect sense that vampires would do that. Absolute perfect sense. But it is a bit on the nose. I think that is the thing with it, that you feel like, a kidnapping a teenage girl. If it was a fantasy world, it just wouldn't seem as bad. But in this,
I think it was a lot grittier than I expected, because I suppose my prejudice about this game, it was full of kind of goths in frilly shirts, sort of, wafting about, being angst-ridden vampires, and I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all. It was pretty down and dirty from the get-go, and so that did open my eyes a bit, because I mean I thought it was all going to be a little bit Brad Pitt, but
I think we were angst-ridden. But we were doing it wrong. That's the thing, isn't it? We were angst-ridden, but we were doing it wrong. You're not supposed to be angst-ridden, no.
But we weren't sort of, like slapping our hands to our forehead and go, "Oh, woe is me, I'm an immortal superhero." No.
I don't think you felt like superheroes at any point, did you?
No.
That was quite a surprise, actually, how vulnerable you were and how sort of crap you were as a vampire. I mean, almost everything. Some of the situations we got ourselves into were because we were rubbish.
So I always think of Pathetic Sharks from Viz.
What struck me about it was being, I think myself and Martin said right at the beginning that we were on the back foot with Vampire. I think you did a good job in presenting it in a different way than I was expecting, because I think what struck me about the early parts of this, it was like Knights Black Agents in reverse, where we were the vampires rather than the superheroes. The agents trying to stop us, and now there's a kind of thrill to that. But I think, like everybody else, there were points of it where I kind of winced a little at some of the aspects of it, because you think, like, morally you feel compromised because you're playing the bad guys, and is there any fun in that? Is there fun in being bad in these situations? And
I don't know, really. I'm not sure. I mean, it didn't. It'd be interesting from your perspective, Sam. But with that, this didn't really come through when we were playing Fall of London. Okay, so the campaign that it's based on, for London, essentially what you were playing through there was like the precursor. So basically, D.I. Singh, although you never came across him, Sam, when we played it, he's quite an important part of the Second Inquisition, and this is like he's instigating. This is what made him into what he became, which essentially destroyed the kindred society of London in 2010 in vampire history.
But quite a steep learning curve with this particular adventure. That you don't really know what your power levels are, so you don't know how you can affect a lot of other things that are going on. Because our main missions were to throw these two coppers off the trail, weren't they? And we didn't really manage to do any of that. We didn't know what to do or how to do it. I think it was it's interesting. Try to make steps and.
It was quite open, wasn't it? Like, it was quite sandboxy.
And I think I wanted it to be that way, in as much because I wanted to explore a bit of because I was conscious that it was a relatively small number of sessions, and I wanted to say, okay, let's try bits of the vampire world, so a bit of the Camarilla, a bit of the Anarchs, a bit of losing humanity, etc., etc. And I was conscious that because when we played Fall of London, which is not sandboxy at all, it's pretty railroady in a lot of ways. But I just thought it was such an interesting background just to throw it open. But you're absolutely right, Chris, in as much as this as the person running it felt a lot, although I used Night's Black Agent, so things like the people smuggling operation is what Ken Hite talks about as how the vampires set their cities up. So I used, and I thought actually this, so we sort of skated over that, didn't we? Because it felt uncomfortable coming at it from that perspective. So yeah, I think it's an interesting game. I'm not entirely sure how to pitch it. So I think superheroes with fangs is probably easier. It's almost like you just skate over the fact, okay, you have to drink blood, but then you're doing, you're fighting other vampires. It's more that sort of stuff. Whereas when you start to interact more with the mortal world, then it becomes more problematic in my head. So, yeah, interesting.
Well, we discussed this with somebody who, Roderick, who was really immersed in the world of doing it as a LARP. And he had a lot of familiarity with the world and the different factions that are involved in it. And he got quite excited when we explained the predicament that we were in. And he said, "Oh yeah, this is great because you can play one side against the other. They don't need to know who you are." And we thought, this is really exciting. But we didn't really know enough about our placings in the world to actually leverage that, and I think that is it is one of those settings where you really need to know the nuances of the different elements that are in play to really get the benefit of it.
I would agree with that, and I think it's a bit of lots of games have settings and lots of games have detailed settings, but there's often a way into those games without knowing the setting. But it did feel with this that as like Sam suggested, you don't quite know your power level. And Chris has said there's all these kind of factions. You don't quite know difficult to know you fit into it unless you have a very thorough understanding of it. So in a weird way, of all the games I've ever played, it's probably the one where I'd say the setting is the biggest barrier. I mean, people talk about Glorantha or whatever, but there's ways into that. There are easy ways into those games, where you can do something simple. And whilst this started off as being quite simple, what we had to do, it felt increasingly complicated because you thought, oh, there's this world and there's the coterie and the Camarilla and the factions. Oh, blimey, how do we fit into all this? And it's quite difficult to, get your head into, I think.
I totally agree with that. I think I'm not afraid of games with lots of lore, but this one seemed like you either had to know it all. You had to know, like the entry level was really high in terms of how much lore you had to know to make the game kind of accessible. Whereas Glorantha, you can do a dungeon bash against Trollkin, and you can kind of work your way like an ever-expanding circle of lore knowledge. Whereas here I felt you needed to know a little bit more. And you guided us through it. Like, so the big meeting at the Shard, I think that gave us like a bit of an insight into what was going on. And so that was really helpful.
I think I think you're right. I don't know all the background. Also, when we played with Sam and with Kat and Pay, etc., they know all that stuff. So basically, I just relied on them they just talked about it, and then they constructed themselves. They didn't need me to do it. I think if I was, because again, the idea is to try and give you a bit of sense. Okay, this is what it's like. This is how it works. If I was going to start from, okay, let's just start from like a really simple setup. It would be like a near dark setting. So you're just a group of vampires who suddenly fight. Someone's just created a bunch of vampires out in the desert. Go. But then it becomes, I don't know, it's a different play experience. It's a lot simpler, but you don't get that exposure to, what is vampire really about, which is this whole Camarilla, Church of Cain. We didn't even touch on the Church of Cain, all this stuff going on. But again, I say it can be as you say, Sam, it's a massive can be a massive learning curve.
Yeah. I think you did a good job of guiding us through it, and giving us that insight. Because, like you say, if you do it as a near dark thing, it becomes a different game, doesn't it? It becomes like You could imagine playing it as a kind
survival horror, isn't it?
yeah,
In
vampire
then.
survival horror. You've got to survive as a vampire, and people are going to be hunting you. And I must admit, when I created my character, I imagined that we'd have vampire hunters coming after us and things like that. And of course, you don't really. That's not really what it's about at all. You're more at threat from the other vampires, the faction,
or yourselves.
Yeah, yourself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, because I was very keen to play a Christopher Lee type character, because I think, somebody says to me vampire, I think Christopher Lee. And obviously there's not much of a role for the Christopher Lee vampire in the world of vampire, is there? He's kind of like, maybe on the Ventru. That's why I chose a Ventru, because clearly they're the most Christopher Lee-like. But yeah, I kind of got that bit toward the end.
Yeah.
I think I like Chris's idea of it's kind of Knights, Black Agents in reverse, set in London. So it's sort of Neasden's Black Agents.
Yeah.
And
that's where I was trying to come from again. Like, looking at the Conspiramid in Knights Black Agents, thinking actually you could the Fall of London would be a brilliant setting for that if you played Knights Black Agents in that setting, because it's all set up for you in there. But yeah. Yeah, but no, I mean, thanks for playing. It's good fun to run it. I think it is. It gave me a bit. I think there's one having an open world setting is great, but then it means that player characters can do anything at all. And so how do we weave this into some sort of a conclusion? Hopefully we got there in the end. I knew roughly where I wanted to get to, but it's always part of it, isn't it?
I did like the challenge that you gave us, Steve, in the fact that what you said was, you are not superheroes. You are people. You're monsters, and the mechanics kind of supported that approach, didn't they? And I think that's what really challenged us all as role playing it. That idea that you are the monsters, we are the bad guys, and I think because we are people who probably ponder on these kind of moral compromises, we kind of overthought it at points, and I think that's where we found it difficult. I don't know what the other players felt.
I think if we've been playing this game as a Game of Thrones style fantasy game, I don't think we've had any problems with the morality of it. And somebody else, another house, just go and kill them, turn their daughters, whatever. But because it's more modern day, it's a lot closer to where we're actually at. I think we're all sort of fathers and things, so it's all a little bit dodgy. So yeah,
I would agree. I think that is the main problem with it. It's just that, and a bit like you said, Sam, where at times we didn't know what to do. I think part of that for me was because of that moral thing of thinking, well, I know what I could do, but I don't ever want to do it.
I don't want to do it.
I don't want to do it. But then at the same time, I think your comment last session is right, gets to the heart of it. But I don't want to do it. But would Maggie do it? Because Maggie's a vampire. So maybe she would. But I didn't want to.
It's interesting, isn't it, that like something that's ostensibly a game, well, it is a game, but you, as you say, you said, right, morally, how do we deal with this? What do we feel comfortable with? What don't we feel uncomfortable with? So, for example, at the moment, I'm reading a lot of Forbidden Lands, and there's a lot of like slavery built into the background there, and some of the adventure sites are pretty unpleasant. And I was thinking, actually, I'm not entirely comfortable with this stuff, but I think it's interesting. Again, it sort of forces you to probably confront things and just consider. It's not all fun and games, is it? It's actually, there's things that we say that yes to this, but no to that. And I think that's an interesting sort of mental exercise, isn't it? Really,
it's the only. I think it's the only game I've ever played where I would imagine I could end up using an X card as a player.
Yeah.
I've played loads of games where people get X cards out, and I've never ever thought I'm going to have to use that. I'm going to have to tap that X card because something's going to crop up. Call of Cthulhu, all sorts of games. You think, yeah, it's horror, it's this, it's that, it's violent. But this is the one game where I thought I can imagine playing this and going, oh no, tapping.
And we did do that collectively, didn't we? In between sessions, we went, "Do you know what, this thing about human trafficking? We're just not going to refer to that again. That's it.
Yeah.
And so we collectively touched the X card on that one, which is quite right.
From that perspective, has been really interesting because it's put us in that position as gamers, and you don't end up in that position a lot of the time, do you? Because you avoid that,
I think, I don't know because I didn't play in your other game of it, but I think if your game then is just becoming the kind of, well, is it the Camarilla or the Anarchs who are one up? Maybe you do lose something if that's the whole game. If you aren't kind of trying to bump off a copper, then you do lose that kind of moral conflict that I think, although we didn't really like some of it and some of it was a bit on the nose, as we said, it did make the game interesting. Whether if it was just factions of vampires playing one-upmanship on each other, then the dimension gets lost, doesn't it?
It's just different then, isn't it? I suppose, but no, it's like as I say, thanks for playing. I think it was fun. It was great. It's very different to running it beforehand. And I think if I was going to revisit the World of Darkness, it would probably be through Werewolf, which is a completely different experience in that one, or maybe Hunter, which is more like Night's Black Agents. But yeah. So, any final thoughts? Are we done? I think it's late now.
Just to say thanks, Steve, because
thanks again for playing.
It was essentially the game that put me in the deep freeze in many ways. So
didn't put you back in this time, though.
No, I'm glad I've driven a stake through its heart, as it were. So I'm pleased to have done that.
Yeah, great stuff.
Yeah, thanks for running it.
What I say it was good to play this game with you, where it felt comfortable and you managed it really well. And I have to say that this is the game where I've spoken the most about morality and some of the kind of ethics around role-playing games and experiences that I'm not really experienced about role-playing. So I thank you for that, because I think it's kind of touched areas that I've not really encountered before. And I think it is
areas you didn't want touched ever.
Yeah,
frankly, leave those areas alone.
I would agree with that, because I think that's very true in that you can sometimes be dismissive of those things when you're gaming, because the idea that people might get upset, so this, that, and the other. I sometimes think, oh, come on, it's a game, it's made up stuff. But then we've all found ourselves in a position with this where we thought, oh, hang on, So it's it is good to be put in that position. And thanks for running it, because I think it's good for someone to run it who was also kind of exploring it with us as well, which I think made it more kind of palatable and enjoyable, I think.
Yeah. Well, it was good fun, and so thanks for playing. But take it easy, and I think next week it's for me it's Savage Worlds on Wednesday, which is a completely different experience, and then Forbidden Lands, which is horrible but in a slightly different way. So thanks for playing, guys. All right, thanks for recording.
Thanks, guys.
Take it easy. Cheers. Bye bye. Thanks, Sam. See you. Thanks for listening to another exploration of my gaming vexes. If you've got any thoughts you'd like to add to what you've heard here, or a gaming vex of your own you'd like to offer up for discussion, you can get in touch with me on Blue Sky via @orlanth.bsky.social or via Discord as orlanth.vex. Until next time, may all of your games be free of vexatiousness and be excellent to each other always.